I hope speaking in English is okay for you. Thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you at this conference at Tempelhof. Recently I've been coming to Berlin to participate in discussions about the future of the ICC building, your conference center on the west side of the city. And it's very interesting to go there, to come here, to see the coordinated effort that's going into the preservation of these buildings and also the thinking about their amazing potential for future uses. As someone from the UK, in Britain, those projects would be handled less well by commercial interests. It's very interesting to see what you're doing. My practice in London and Zurich has been working in different European countries on both new and existing buildings for 35 years. But in the last few years, we've been trying to focus more exclusively on work to existing buildings rather than making new buildings. And in my 30-minute talk, I'm going to show you 4 examples that are recent projects by my practice that involve the repair and transformation of existing buildings, some of which are historic, some of them are not protected, because in this time of the climate crisis, we think it is very important for architects to show how buildings can be transformed for new uses, and especially to avoid their demolition. And our particular interest applies especially to the generation of buildings from the 1960s and 1970s, a generation that is coming up for major renovation, and I'm going to show you one hopeful example of that. So I hope that these 4 examples will show you that architecture working in transformation is just as interesting as the architecture of new buildings. So the first example is in Holland, in Eindhoven. It's the transformation of a protected monument on the edge of the city. This is a warehouse building called the Wiengebouw, which was a storage warehouse for electrical parts as part of the very large Philips industrial site built in 1943. This is a historic photograph of the building, which is on the City Ring Road, and you can see that it's a massive warehouse, and on the roof there was a radio station, a gymnasium for directors of the company to exercise while looking out over their factory, and there was a mast in timber for the radio station, which has long since disappeared. The building was extremely unusual and difficult to transform because of its nature. It's 100 meters long, 50 meters wide, with a grid of very large columns at 6-meter centers. This image shows the interior of the building and the kind of spaces that we began with. And you can see the massive columns. We went through many ideas about how to reuse this building, including carving out spaces in the center of its massive volume. But in the end, we went forward with a simpler concept. The idea was to introduce a layer of uses. So on the ground floor, there's a market, a food market. On the middle 9 floors, we introduced ramps so that the floors could be used for car parking, providing parking spaces, 500 parking spaces for the whole city quarter development. And then on the roof, we added 3 stories of housing. The engineers told us that those columns were of sufficient strength to support another 3 floors, so we added 3 levels, and you can go to the housing by this staircase and lift on the left-hand side. This model shows our proposal where we have replaced or put back a version of the radio mast in welded steel and placed the 3 stories of housing on the roof. You can see them on the right-hand side of this model that we made. If you look over the roof of that model, you can see how the housing has been arranged as 2 long terraces either side of a landscape courtyard. The houses have party walls at 6-meter centres and are standing, therefore, on the structure below, the structure, as it were, providing the rhythm of the facade expression. The terraces contain ground floor flats and 2-story maisonettes above with roof terraces. This is an image of the project that was completed 2 years ago. And you can see the housing on the rooftop on the left there, which we have made carefully in brick. As you can see, the facade of the housing uses brick, and we're working with the architecture of the existing building that we found when we started. So the building was made in the 40s, and it has curved brick corners in a rather modern fashion, in a sort of reference to the Amsterdam school. So we used that idea to design this upper story with horizontal and vertical bands of brickwork which are woven together to form this frieze-like facade which expresses the individual houses on the roof. So, and we're looking here at the transformation of the building with the ground floor food court, which is a public use, the 9 stories of parking and the housing on the roof. So you could say that instead of trying to make the new additions contrast with the existing building, instead of trying to distance what you do from what you find, we've tried to make them strongly related. The idea being that the housing, as it were, provides a top to the composition, making the building different from its former industrial quality to a more metropolitan quality, which feels appropriate to its new use. So when you see the building in its new context, you're looking here down the former avenue, which used to be full of trains and single-story sheds, that's become a public boulevard with the warehouses and new buildings forming this massive street, and the Wiemgebouw building is standing there at the head of this length of buildings, which are quite dramatic and like a big train, really. Here is the entrance to the housing on the corner, the hallway inside, in which we have reintroduced colours that we found in analysis of the historic colours of the building, the car park with the ramp that we've introduced, and then arriving at the top floor housing, you come out of the lift here into this shared courtyard, the courtyard being this long space providing individual access to the houses and flats, which is lit at night by this mast at the head of the building, which provides an icon at the top of the building in the manner of other buildings in Eindhoven that are celebrating the presence of Philips in the city. So the second project I want to show is a transformation of a commercial building in Brussels called the Royal Belge. This is a project that, again, we finished 2 years ago. The project is the transformation of this office building that was built as the corporate headquarters of the AXA insurance company in 1970 by the renowned Belgian modernist René Stapels, modeled on various American corporate headquarters from the 1960s. And the building was built for the insurance company's 1,000 staff. It's placed in these beautiful landscape gardens, which are, the building is protected, the landscape is protected, but because of its out-of-city location, such a building no longer has a future as an office building. As you know, the way in which people are working in offices now is changing. Everything is about location. People are willing to come into offices if their buildings are centrally located, but less willing to go to offices that are out of town. So something different had to be done with this building, which had been empty for 5 years. The building was the first use of Corten steel in the facade in Europe, with these magnificent interiors in situ concrete, with very deep office space, and in the bottom right, of course, state-of-the-art computer facilities. This image gives you a sense of the organization of the building in its park context. It's built into the side of a hill, which contains a massive underground car park. There's a plinth of 2 stories and a tower above it, which contained the offices. So in this section, you see the new arrangement of the uses of the building. So a single use as offices was no longer viable. The client was a consortium who arranged a mix of uses. In the upper part of the tower, there are boutique offices for art dealers and lawyers. In the lower part of the tower, there's a 150-bedroom hotel. In the plinth, there's a health club, which is using levels within the underground car park, and also a food market and co-working space. And in the center of the building, in the deepest part of the plan, we carved a very large hole, a big circular space, which was necessary to provide an entrance area for all of these uses, so that there was a possible synergy between the idea of the mix of uses. And I wanted to show you these images of the transformation of the building. Here you can see the glass has been removed. You can see the beautiful in situ concrete structure, and how we are cutting into the base car park to introduce windows for the lower level of the health club. The process of transformation of the existing building, including stripping back its interiors, which is very dramatic, and the exposure of the structure of the building above the former suspended ceilings, which we took away to introduce greater ceiling height and to make newer, as it were, rougher interiors. To reuse a building like this saves, as you know, an enormous amount of energy. And in the next 25 to 30 years, which is the period when we really need to make a difference about reducing our emissions, it is much more sensible to keep and transform an existing building than it is to build a new, very sustainable building. The amount of energy that you will save by not making a new construction is far more than the energy that any new building can save. Here you are cutting into the floors in the center of the plan to make this new circular space and introducing a steel column to prop up the concrete ceiling. And here the steel column has been cast in concrete to resemble the beautiful columns of the existing structure that you can see in the distance. The facade was dismantled and refurbished on site, with the glass being replaced and put back approximately 3 centimeters further out from the existing concrete structure, but closely resembling the building and reusing all of its parts. So when you look at the finished building, obviously this is not the kind of architecture that I imagined I was going to be working on when I was a younger architect. Nevertheless, we've had a big effect on it. On the left-hand side, you can see the new windows to the health club. All of the balustrading's been changed because the building regulations have changed. We've introduced this new escape stair in the center there, in the manner of the previous building, because fire regulations have changed. We have changed the glazing because the degree of tint in the glass was just too much for modern office standards. So we have changed the building. We're in a conversation with René Staples, who's referring to the American architects Roche and Dinkeloo in the 60s, who used to work for Louis Kahn in the 40s and 50s. Kahn himself, who got a lot of his ideas from ancient Rome, as you probably know. So you're participating in an interesting conversation over the architectural ages. This is the completed building, where you can just see in the evening the difference between the office spaces and the hotel, and the new central space that we have made that provides the entrances to the hotel, to the health club, to the offices, connecting them down into the car park. And the way that we have repaired the roof, where we took away lift cores and cut into the ceiling, we've repaired it with steel. Maybe you can just see the difference between the steel structure and the concrete structure, if you look carefully. So the third project, I think I'm doing okay for time, is the transformation of the Dungerbau in Wittikon, which is a project being carried out by our Swiss office, our Zurich office. It's the transformation of a building on the left-hand side there on the lake, a former fertilizer factory from the late 1900s. And here's the building in the center, which you can see. It's a big building with absolutely no windows. Other buildings around it are going to be removed and replaced by new housing buildings to make this new city quarter, but the developer decided to keep this central building in order to provide a character and some public uses in the center of the development. That low building on the right-hand side, which is touching the taller building, was also going to be taken away. And you can see here the very beautiful situation of this new building development, where the Dungerbau building faces the lake, and it's intended to be a place for studio spaces, light industrial uses, and a cafe and community use for the new estate. The building is not listed, so it's not protected. It could have been demolished. And we were invited to participate in designing one of the new buildings, but this was the part that really interested us, with this very special timber structure, which is holding up the roof, stabilizing the entire structure and previously supporting the industrial processes, and providing support to the brick wall, which is self-load-bearing. And the building, this huge building, is organized in three bays, three long halls. So the proposition is to remove the brickwork in all of the blind windows of the building in order to make it have sufficient daylight, to introduce new openings in the ground floor where required, and on the right-hand side you can see we have invented a facade to provide larger windows for the cafe use. Here you can see the plan. Looking at the upper level, the three bays of the building, where the central bay is going to be used as circulation, and the two structural bays along the north and south side will be used as studio spaces. Those circles are staircases and small meeting rooms. So the interesting thing about this building is that we are, because it's not listed, it's not protected, we are able to use the existing timber structure and elaborate it in order to make it work completely differently. So we've introduced a new timber structure on top of the existing to support these two upper floors, with the ground floor which is like infrastructural space, and the upper two floors that are studio spaces, where the new and existing structures are integrated. So on the ground floor on the left, you can see new columns that we have introduced to support the first floor. It's a completely new timber structure integrated into the old, something that you could never do in the UK. I'm not sure about Germany. And here, the end elevation, where that building was taken away, and we have invented this facade from the, as it were, the scar of the removed building to make these new windows for the cafe on the ground floor. Okay, and then finally, to show you a project that we're doing in the UK. It's a project in Arbroath, which is in the east side of Scotland, facing the North Sea, for an arts organisation called Hospital Field Arts. What I enjoy about my practice is the variety of projects that we work on, and this one is, again, very different. It's a beautiful old building of many ages. It has structure from the 12th century, when it was a hospital for pilgrims who were travelling to Arbroath Abbey, and it's been changed in the 15th century, the 18th century, and most recently in the 19th century. And the organisation provides residencies for artists in their mid-career. The artists go there and they live in the house, and they use the studio facilities in the grounds, and it's also starting to be open to the public. Here you can see the organisation of the whole estate, with the house in the middle, its gardens surrounded by this ring of trees, and the fields also owned by the organisation, the charity. and the various projects that we're working around the house in the gardens. So looking at this proposal, this is a plan, and we've been working on this project for 9 years, because in Scotland, as in many other parts of the world, funding for their projects, particularly for arts organisations, is very limited. So we made a plan with them to realise the improvements to the estate over a number of phases. In this model, you're seeing the house in the middle, which is being slowly renovated. On the right-hand side, the walled garden, where the client has renewed the garden completely with the involvement of the local community and a landscape designer. And we made that small building in the top left-hand corner of the garden, which is a new cafe, which I'll show you. At the top, behind the house, there are studios from 1900, which we have renovated, as well as a new building, that little red building in the top left, which is a new studio building, and then future projects on the left, the U-shaped new accommodation building around a courtyard, and on the bottom left, the new visitor centre and archive building, yet to be built. So this project is about adding facilities to the property in order to allow it to become more public, to generate some income for the organisation so it can be more sustainable, but generally to bring more life to the estate, which when the director started there was quite abandoned and derelict. This is the new garden, and on the right-hand side, the project that we've made, which is shown here. We built a new little cafe in the corner there, which is like a conservatory in the site of where there used to be greenhouses, and we have restored the building on the right, which was derelict. The building on the right is a Victorian fernery. This is a building that the Victorians built specifically to house their collections of ferns, because they were mad about plant collecting in the late 19th century. The fernery it's like a built ruin, so you make a kind of grotto-like stone structure on the lower floor where the ferns can be happy in their moisture and shade, and a conservatory above. So we had to invent the upper part of this building, because there was no evidence of how it used to be, and restore it internally, and to make this new cafe which looks out over the gardens. This image that we've made shows the project behind the house, where you're looking through a garden to the studio buildings from 1900, and in the distant left-hand side, the new building that we have added. Here you're looking at that new studio building on the right, which is sort of resting its arms on a wall, looking out over the field, and the painting studio from 1900 that we have restored. Here you see the new building on the left, which is built in wood, and the existing buildings in stone that we have restored. The new building is not trying to blend in very much with the existing buildings. It's trying to add something to the character of what's there by making simple gestures in the vernacular of making timber buildings. It has a facade of stained silver timber shingles. Here you can see perhaps the things that interest us most, the details of the building and how it negotiates its condition standing against a historic wall, where you're seeing here the tiles of the facade, where they meet a little roof that we've made over the wall of the existing building. There's the sea in the distance on the left, very beautiful situation. And the work that we did to renovate the existing painting studios, where we took the roof off in order to insulate the timber structure from above, put the stone tiles back, and internally we took the walls out in order to insulate it from the inside and replace it with new floor and wall finishes. And just to make the point to you that architects should, I think, we are just as interested in the restoration of buildings as we are in making new things. To us, they're completely equal. They're of equal interest. And this final image is showing the model with, on the left-hand side, the future projects that we hope to build, the new accommodation building and the new archive and collections building. So those are my 4 examples of imaginative transformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing these beautiful examples and also for setting the tone for the rest of our conference. We do have a little bit of time left to take any questions, remarks, whatever you have. If so, please raise your hand, let us know. Okay.
Thank you for showing the works. It was very interesting. In my opening remarks, I stated that it is very important to know a building well before you start. And I was asking myself the question of how deep is your research on the buildings before you start on the site, and who is doing this research? Is it professional art historians, or do you have architects in your office who are doing the research on the building itself? And did also you working as an office changed in the way the office is structured or put together by professions in this transformation, going more to yes, the renewal of existing buildings?
Well, I think that is a very interesting question, something we've thought about. We're not a large practice, so we can't employ specialists in the manner of a larger scale practice that works in building conservation. But there are several architects in our office who have historic building conservation qualifications, who have joined us. Generally, when you work, as of course you know, when you work on a historic building, you have to produce a detailed document about the history of the building, and we have used conservation consultants to carry out that research. But it's something that we also do ourselves, that we're very interested in doing. It feels impossible to operate in these situations unless you have a great level of familiarity with what you're working with. So we take a lot of care about understanding the history of the project, all of its histories and its social history. And we also are very, very careful about how we make drawings. So a lot of work goes into surveying the project at the beginning, making sure that the survey is completely accurate, which is becoming easier and easier with new technologies, so that you're working with a very precise set of information about what you have. And then the conversations that we have are in our practice at least, always very much about the detail. We've never really wanted to have a large practice. Adam Caruso and myself, our practice is of medium scale, so that we can look at every project every week and talk a lot about the detail.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your talk. It was really, really interesting, and I think particularly the care and reflection that you put into the decisions about when you put a lot of energy into things that ultimately disappear, and a lot of energy into things which are in a conversation with the existing, which is not about copying it, but which is extremely careful and respectful, and establishes a fascinating dialogue between the historical substances, witness of the past, and its future potential and prosperity, and is very, very unique. I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate a little bit on your reflections coming from the UK and now working abroad and having an office in Switzerland and so on. How that's, you've mentioned a little bit about how some projects would be more difficult, would be different if they were in the UK as compared to another country. How's that changed the way you work? And elaborate a little bit on the reflections of working in different countries and how that changes how you think about how you approach a project.
Yes, it is something that I've always found very interesting, the different ways in which countries' systems work, and our office has, we have taught in different countries, and our small office is very international. I mean, I come from a country in which we are we've always been a nation very interested in history, so that there is a very sophisticated dialogue about working with existing buildings and historic buildings. Nevertheless, the conversation is different because usually you're working with private clients, and the whole system of planning is different because you are, and more, in my experience, adversarial, because you are constantly representing a private client to the city, trying to persuade them to do things that perhaps they're suspicious about. Whereas when you work in Germany or in Belgium, there's a more, in my view, sophisticated conversation where, and of course it's not universal, but we've found situations where the city and the client are brought together by the city to run a competition, let's say, but also to participate in negotiations through the process, where you have this balance of interests between the public interests and the private interests in a more organized way. And that suits us to participate in the competition process that we find in Germany and in Belgium, to lesser extent in other European countries. And then in Switzerland it's totally different, because it's a much smaller and much wealthier country, where architects are treated very differently. The competition process is much more normal, and they're as a kind of nation, they're really interested in architecture. So it's very different. So that it's fascinating. We have found, honestly, Germany as a place where we can flourish, where we're able to make commercial buildings of really good quality in interesting situations because of that relationship between the city and the public and the private sphere. It works really well here, or better here than in the UK.
Yes, my question maybe adds on to that very much. Thank you for the presentation and the inspiring work that you presented. And I think one thing is, of course, working with existing buildings from a legal perspective, also, of course, architecturally. But my experience is, okay, how does it economically work? So how do you put the program in? And at what point in your process are these considerations kicking in, basically, and who is making those decisions? Because that's very difficult, I think, to really make it an economically viable project in the end as well. And maybe you can elaborate on that as well.
Well, there's no universal rule, but generally it is not cheaper to work with an existing building than it is to do a new building. And that's often the reason why clients will want to demolish. I think, I like to think that in future generations there will be legislation that will make it more difficult to demolish, that will change that, that financial difficulty. I think, to me, the really interesting question is perhaps how architects can show how to reuse buildings economically that are not listed. How do you prevent the demolition of this generation of buildings from the 1970s, for example, that people historically don't like? How do you show them that actually it's a good thing to transform them, and actually the quality of their construction allows them to make really good spaces? And so there's no formula to it, but it's about demonstrating that the architectural quality, the quality of what you'll get is better generally than what you can afford to do if you do it new. So you have to try and persuade in many different ways. But if I'm honest, you know, we are a commercial practice. We are deeply connected to the commercial world, and sometimes that argument works, and sometimes it doesn't. And you can't always afford to walk away from it. So it isn't an easy question.
I might have a final question for you, Peter. So in your presentation, you opened up the sphere of the imaginary, and you sort of took us also in this journey of how you look at buildings. And I would be really interested in hearing from you, since this is the first time that you're actually here at Tempelhof Airport. I would be curious to hear, like, how does the airport speak to you?
I need to, I mean, Heinz Giroux has told me a little bit about how it's working here, and I was very interested to hear about the short-term uses that you have. There's so many interesting things that are happening here already, and also what I've heard about the airfield and what a popular place it is for events, and this amazing park. Idea of a park that the airfield has become, and then what I've seen this morning, a sense of the careful stewardship that you are taking over the care of this building, the responsibility to make sure that it continues to not fall into a state of repair beyond what you can preserve it, so that, and how important, and it's obviously a very big responsibility, but I can really imagine that in decades to come, in 20 years, 30 years, there are extraordinary things that could happen here, and some of which we can't imagine yet. So I think it's very exciting. I'd like to know more.
Thank you.